Another week goes by, but positivity stays strong. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everyone and everything in between, welcome and hello. We are the Stay Positive Podcast. I am one of your two hosts, Alex.
That was pretty smooth. I like that.
Thank you. I had a week's worth to practice. Alex and Pete here, and today we're talking about education and how hard it is to educate people.
Yeah, I've told you countless times how much I meditate on education, the problem of education, not only in the US, but all over the world. And how do we teach people the right ways to do things? How do we do it effectively? How do we get the right amount of money and buy-in from the right constituencies to continue educating in the quote-unquote right way? It's just an enormous problem to me.
Yeah, there's just so many different factors, and some of which I wish weren't factors, like the money. Money shouldn't be a factor for education, but it is because someone's got to pay the teacher, someone's got to pay for the food, someone's got to pay for the building. It's just the textbooks, all that stuff. It's just I wish it was easier. But
I agree.
On top of all that stuff, then you have the people teaching and the stuff you teach these kids. It's tough, man. Because when you interview a teacher, right, they're going to be smiles. They're going to be wear their suit or their nice dress. They're going to really show you how phenomenal a teacher they are. But when they're actually in the room, with all respect to the teachers of America and the world, some of you could do better, to put it nicely.
That's hilarious.
I feel like the profession of teacher, because I was a tutor for math for a few kids, so which is not a teacher with a classroom setting, but it is interaction with the student, so to speak. And there's just a level of decorum, there's a level of professionalism that I feel like should be required of teachers. I think because when you're a teacher, whether you're a math teacher, science teacher, English teacher, history teacher, whatever teacher, you need to stay on that topic and try not to deviate while also making it entertaining. Because especially for, young students like middle school, elementary school, or early high school, before a person becomes an adult, they are very moldable. Their development of their mind can be affected by their environment. And as a teacher, you should try to display a sense of, respect, a sense of discipline, a sense of, I don't think honor, but you need to present yourself in such a way that a student should look at you and say, he or she, we're cool, we're someone we would want to be. Because
I think the word you're looking for is dignity.
Dignity, that's the word right there.
Yeah.
But what do you think? Don't you feel because kids can be cruel, kids can be mean. They'll call you poopy face. It's hard. It's ruthless out there, dude. Pete. It's ruthless.
Dude, kids are horrible.
They are, but that's the point. You have to make them not horrible, and how do you do that? By being not horrible in front of them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. The problem is that I think we don't place enough emphasis on the importance of the teacher in developing these kids, right?
Yeah.
It is literally on them in so many ways, and yet there is no real I don't want to say repercussion for a job being poorly done, but you have so much power in your hands as a teacher, and a lot of people don't recognize that sometimes. Maybe they do. I don't know. I'm not a teacher. I don't plan on being a teacher. If it ever happens, I guess I'll eat my words then, but right now, that's not the plan. What I'm trying to say is you have a huge responsibility. You are cultivating the next generation as a teacher, as an educator. And if you cannot put it past yourself to be the most selfless possible human being you can be in this context, then why are you doing that which you purport to love? That's just my only question for these teachers. I mean, you see so many times that teachers are out there doing things that just seem so pointless. And not pointless, but they just seem so counterproductive to the whole point of their profession. And people pursue professions out of a sense of self-worth and a sense of purpose. But for those that don't pursue certain professions, they do it just simply because they didn't have opportunities, right? And that's very valid reason in life. Other people, they just do it because they don't care about anything else. And I think those people are really damaging to something like education.
I think you're 100% right. Because while you were talking, I was imagining, like, imagine being an English teacher and you're supposed to be teaching your students English. But all of a sudden, you start talking about how your day was or your relationship or how you're feeling. It's like, those are all valid sentiments, but in the setting of a teacher teaching their students, that's not what you're there for, and that's not what they're there for. You have a job, you have a mission, and that mission is to educate these kids in the field in which you are, quote-unquote, a master in, or an expert in, or knowledgeable in. You know, if you're a math teacher and you're talking about, I don't know, something silly like, I don't know, politics, relationships, you know, what you did last weekend, you know, that's not the time and place for this. And I just feel that hurts the kids, you know, way worse than I think people give credit for. It's like, that's not to say you should treat your kids like robots, like, don't have a sense of humor, don't engage them, don't treat them like little people, because they are, you know, they're adults in the making, you know, they're soon to be amongst us. But at the same time, you should treat them, you should show yourself up in this situation as very respectable and dignified, to the point that the children, they look up to you. Because I remember in school, I had like 3 teachers that I personally looked up to, but not only me, but like the delinquents of my school, they looked up to them because they were so professional. The level of professionalism was so high that even like the not good students recognized a good teacher. You know, I really think it's powerful. And I think what made those teachers like exceptional teachers was not only their professionalism, but something that I think is also missing in some teachers in America and probably the world. And that is a love for the material, or a willingness to make the material enjoyable to learn. Like, why learn it? This brings me to an example. I saw, I think, a high school physics teacher, and he did an experiment to demonstrate like the law of like conservation of momentum or friction. He basically did that experiment where he holds a big wrecking ball to his face and he lets go. And because of physics, the ball will swing to the right and then it'll swing back into him, but it won't hit him because of physics. You know, that's how physics works. And he was making it
at MIT.
Yeah. No, but like, that's fun. Like, that is fun. I can see myself being 5 years old and looking at that and being like, oh wow, that's really cool. Because he's telling jokes, he's cracking up, he's having fun, and he's saying, now listen everyone, I am putting my life on the line because I believe in physics. You know, that's fun, but it's also learning. Like, the child will learn from that, and they will remember that forever. I remember it, and I didn't even learn it as a kid. I learned that like a year ago or 2 years ago, and I still remember it. Because it's just a fun way to teach. And I'm imagining there was that, I think you showed me a video of, either you showed me a video or I found it by myself, of demonstrating how the planets rotate and how the moons revolve around the planets and the planets revolve around the sun, and basically demonstrating how gravity works. And he was cracking jokes. You know, he had a mattress and he was like throwing balls and marbles into it and showing how they would spin around each other, and he was cracking jokes. He was like, he told an anecdote about how he was how the mattress it broke and he had to stitch it back together, and a security guard saw him and he said, what are you doing? And he said to the security guard, he said, I'm stitching up the fabric of reality. And you know, that's funny. That's funny, and like the fact that I remember that like years later, it showcases like you can make teaching fun, you know. But this shows that you, one, you are likable, two, you are respectable, and three, you can make the material accessible to the children. Because you know, I'm in graduate school right now, and I was in undergraduate school a few years ago, and let me tell you something. There are some teachers who are geniuses, brilliant. They are masters of their field. They are bad teachers.
Yeah.
It's easy to read from a textbook. It's easy to show a PowerPoint presentation, but it is hard to like engage the student and convey material in a way that I can absorb it. You know, you the teacher, you know this stuff. You know, you don't need a refresher course. Me, I don't know any of this stuff. You have to kind of dumb it down so I can grasp this material. And I think that applies to all the lower levels of education as well, from high school to middle school to even elementary school. But I feel like I don't know. I don't know how teachers become teachers, like what exams or what line of education they need. But I do feel like that's missing. That character, that engage the students, make it absorbable, make it fun, make it entertaining, while also keeping a professional demeanor. And I know that's a lot to ask, but in my opinion, that is the optimal way to teach kids, to have someone of that character to be the teacher. Because if you don't have that, and you have someone who's like gossiping or talking about their day instead of teaching, like that's what the kids are going to remember, is just a gossiping teacher. They're not going to remember the material, and they're not going to remember the professional demeanor. They're going to remember some grown adult acting like a child. And when they grow up to be an adult, not every kid will learn from this, but I'm confident that subconsciously these kids will internalize, at least some of them, this behavior. Because I understand there's nature and there's nurture, but I think science has proven more and more that nurturing is the more effective at how the human beings turn up as adults. And if the teacher has a really important part in the environment of the children, because think about it, all the Americans and all the Asians and everyone on earth who has gone to school, think about it. Where have you spent the most time in your life? In your house and in your school. And maybe some arbitrary third place.
In your bed.
That's your house. That's your house.
Okay.
My point is, like, think about it. Who affects you the most, or who influences you the most just by the proximity of where you are? Your house, so your family, and the school, so your teachers, and the kids around you. But, you know, the teachers are the ones you're there to pay attention to. So parenting is hard, and I think historically everyone agrees that parenting is hard and it's extremely important. But I feel like we need to have that exact same, like, discipline and recognition towards the teachers as well. In my opinion, of course.
Yeah. There are also, I mean, those are kind of the more social / responsibility types of things that teachers need to have. There are also some fundamental skills and abilities that teachers need to have, in my opinion. Richard Feynman said it the best, actually. Or he did it the best, because he was one of the best intellectuals, one of the best lecturers, incredibly bright human being. I mean, to be fair, he was on the Manhattan Project, which didn't really contribute a lot of positive other than nuclear power plants. But anyways, that's one thing.
I mean, yeah.
Anyways, Richard Feynman was so famous as an educator because of his ability to distill really complicated topics for people into something that could be understandable. And the funny thing is, he was famous. I definitely told you this before, but he was famous when speaking about quantum mechanics. He would always say, if you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't understand it at all.
He was the guy who said that?
Yeah, that was him.
Smart man.
So there's another really famous quote, or it's like I said, it's more like how he lived his life. And this is where the whole explain like I'm 5 movement came up in a way. But he literally would teach in a way that made it so easy for you to understand because he would explain it to you like you're 5 years old. Like, if you knew nothing about gravitational potential energy, or if you had no idea about positrons, neutrinos, particle physics, or I don't even know, just really, really high intellectual stuff, he would still find a way to make you get it. And it's because he would explain it like you're 5. And I found that doing that when you're learning alone, or having someone that can do that for you, it makes a world of a difference. Every time I learn something new and I don't understand it, I try to think of an analogy that works for me, that helps me visualize or maybe visceralize it in some way, because sometimes you can't really understand stuff. Like you can't tell me that you understand electricity and magnetism, right? It's so hard to visualize. Of course, if you do get yourself to a place that you understand it, then you'll be walking on the street and you'll understand that, oh, maybe there are all these electrons that are running through the cables right above us or underneath us in the ground, in the air, in the atmosphere, whatever. All of those things being said, if you can find a way to visceralize those things, analogize those things, then you have one stepping stone, in my opinion. And that's what he did so well. And that's why he was revered as an educator. And I think that teachers, not only in primary school, middle school, high, whatever, they need to incorporate that more. And I think that the teachers that I learned from the best were the ones that made it easy to understand, not because what they were teaching was easy, but because they gave me an opportunity to relate to the topic, you know? Yeah, exactly. It wasn't a very difficult thing to do. But here's another part of that coin, you could say. In order to do that, you have to have an internal master. You have to have an intrinsic mastery of that topic. And that means, hopefully, if unless you're just the gift to Earth that we've never seen before, and you're an intellect, you're a savant. And you can just get things. Unless you're that, you also need a great educator yourself, right? So that when I'm reading about something new, when I'm learning something new, my whole prerogative is to try to figure out a way to make it really easy to understand. And if I had to explain to someone, how would I do that? And sometimes I find myself, when I'm telling somebody about something new and my explanation is too complicated, that just means I don't understand it enough yet. Because if I can't explain it simply, how on God's green earth am I going to give this information to somebody else where they can understand it? It makes no sense. You ever think about that? I know you haven't.
I definitely, I 100% agree with the explain it to me like I'm 5 years old mentality, because I literally, I see no flaw with that logic. And yes, I get it, right? If you're doing super theoretical physics or hyper quantum computing, it's like, yes, I could see how, like, you need to have a basic understanding in the material before I start explaining, because if you know nothing about really complicated issues, yeah, then that's hard to learn. But I think each building block is not too hard to understand, but you need to start like one at a time, and to a certain extent we do that in schools. We do addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. We learn our ABCs, we learn that stuff, and that's great, but I feel like you should do that for everything else, like algebra, trigonometry, earth science, physics, chemistry, literature. There should be that same feeling of, okay, this person, they learned level 1 of this material. Let's move to level 2, and let's teach it to them in a way that's similar to how we taught them the level 1 stuff. And slowly, if you keep building, like, every building in the world is built one piece at a time. Everything. From the pyramids to the Mayan temples to the skyscrapers, it's built one piece at a time. You don't build the whole thing at once. And I feel like that's what some of these teachers try to do. They just give you all the material. It's like, here you go, learn it. And I'm like, wait, what? I don't know this stuff. I thought that's why I'm here, is to learn this material, not to just get a regurgitation of what I'm supposed to know at the end. Just skip to the end. It's like reading a book, except you don't read the book. You just read the last page. It's like, okay, I got it. It's like, no, you didn't. It's something like that. So
yeah, I feel you.
I 100% agree with what you said before about the teach like you're 5 mentality. Who was this? What was the scientist's name?
Richard Feynman.
He's a good man, this guy.
Yeah, he was, man. He was a genius. I mean, yeah, he was a genius. And if you ever feel like you want to learn something new, something random that you would have never known about, whatever, go to Reddit, the subreddit LE5, and you'll find some really interesting stuff there.
LE5?
Some really bright people. ELI5.
Nice. Okay. I'll definitely do that.
Yeah. But that's not the only way also. That this whole problem of education or educating, like I said, I've thought about it so much, and I think there are 2 fundamental axioms to it. What we just talked about was one of them, but the other one is doing. You just got to do stuff. And to be totally honest, you learn from doing and failing. I will always come back to this, and you'll always say, I hate you, you're right, whatever. You got to do stuff. You got to experiment. You got to apply. Do or experience something. Because otherwise, you're not going to know. That's the problem I always had with classes that were super, super theoretical. Sure, I can probably make analogies to understand this material really well. I could take great notes. I can talk with the smartest kids in the class. I could speak with the professor in office hours every single week. I'm not going to really retain any of this if I don't apply it in some way. And that's where a lot of curricula fail. Not only in high school, but definitely in college, especially when you get into very abstract theory of mathematics and physics and just difficult subjects that are very, very, not impossible, but they're very improbable to see. So that's why I say you need to visceralize it in some way, right? If you can't see it, then you need to taste it. You need to feel it. You got to do something where your senses with the world are interacting with said material that you're trying to learn about. That's how we take it in. It is this our nervous system is literally built for us to adapt consistently. And if we are unable to do that, then we're not learning. If we're not learning, then we're not adapting, and it's just a vicious cycle at the end.
You're right. But it's hard.
Yeah, it sucks, man. Failure sucks. One of the most common fears amongst people in general is a fear of failure.
Yeah, I suffer from that too, but I'm slowly but surely overcoming it, trying, failing, and trying again.
It's totally reasonable to feel like that. Everybody at some point in their lives has that, whether it's from familial expectations or just an inability to accept your
limitations,
self-worth. No, the opposite, really, because I think that people don't accept limitations and then go and fear their inability to do something, right?
Yeah, you're right. I think, like you said, it's reasonable, but it's one of those things that as a part of growing up you have to try and learn to overcome. You grow as a person the more you overcome that fear. Yeah.
So, hey man, that's how I like to think about it. But that's just one tiny part of the entire, I don't want to say issue, but it's a beast of a topic.
It's a doozy right there.
It's just difficult because what we talked about, we spent nearly half an hour. And we didn't really go super duper in depth, but we touched on some really fundamental things. That's on the individual basis, right?
Yeah.
What happens at scale now, right? On a school level, university level, country, state. That's a whole other type of problem.
That's just...
think about it. think about it. In a classroom, you have 30 kids. And if you wanted to really effectively teach a class of 30 kids, you would have to figure out ways to help them not necessarily sympathize or empathize with you, but you need to make them understand in a way that they can visceralize the material, right? And every kid's had different experiences. Like, let's say the class is full of a bunch of 15-year-olds. Every single kid there has lived 15 years before they got to that classroom with different experiences, different motivations, nature and nurture, all that. So they're going to have different pathways in their brain. The neural pathways are structured differently, which help them see the world in their own subjective fashion. So as a result, as a teacher, are you going to think of 30 analogies then for your class? No. You're going to think of probably the quote-unquote greatest common factor amongst all possible analogies, right? But then you run into the problem of, okay, how many people can actually relate to? And that's a difficult decision. And then, yeah, that's why I say this is becoming a scalability issue.
It's always a scalability issue. Things always get too big for their buck.
Yeah, so
we need to bring back apprenticeships. We need to bring back apprenticeship, mentorship, relationships.
They already are here, man. I mean,
no, but
you said yourself you were a tutor at once.
No, but like for kids with adults, to like, I don't know, because I keep going back to like Michelangelo and Da Vinci and the Renaissance era. So I've spoken to several people about this, how these guys, they were geniuses by the time they were 20. I'm over the age of 20 and I hardly would ever call myself a genius at anything. And I'm just trying to think, like, what did they do to be a genius at 20 that I didn't do in my life? And the truth is, they were studying their craft from like the age of 5, from the age they could hold a paintbrush, or draw us with sketching or sculpting tools. By the age they could do that stuff, that's what they were doing every day for 20 years, for 15 years. So of course, by the time they're 20, yes, they're already a master of their craft because they spent 15 years doing it. I'm sure if I started right now and I spent 15 years doing like one or two things, by the time I'm like 45, 50, however old I'll be, I'm probably going to be a master at my craft too. They just got an early start.
Yeah. So, okay. If you wanted to bring back apprenticeships, how would you scale that?
That's the hard part.
You see my point?
Yeah, no, you're right.
It's really difficult to do this at scale. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think about this all the time, and I can't begin to say that I've cracked the code because so many bright people that are smarter than me, more experienced, they've been trying to figure this shit out too. Neil deGrasse Tyson is literally making it his life's mission to figure out how to educate people correctly. And he's one of my favorite people to listen to because he brings the same kind of enthusiasm and ability to educate when he's talking about something that you don't really know anything about. And he also brings up a great point too when he says, you should enjoy learning, right? And a lot of kids don't enjoy learning, once again, because there are several factors that have influenced their lives, but also because of the educators themselves. They're not pouring their soul and their hearts into this job, and as a result, they're losing the kids.
Yeah.
Right? They're losing their attention, and that's the most important thing when you're trying to learn something new. You got to give it your full attention, your full undivided effort. So people like that, man, this guy has a PhD in astrophysics. I mean, he runs the Hayden Planetarium in New York City. People like that are trying to solve these problems. And there is common ground in the fact that you understand, you find a way to teach people using the things they know in their lives. But when you take it up several levels of abstraction and add more and more people to the system, it starts becoming an issue of handling all the little outliers or handling the people that aren't getting the attention they deserve. And then that's where small little blips, or we'll say, for lack of better words, the bugs, they can either snowball or they go completely unnoticed. And both situations are horrible in education.
I mean, but how do you stop it when there's like how many people? like 100 million, 200 million. How many kids
in the U.S.?
In the U.S. alone, you have like hundreds of millions of kids. In the world, you have billions of kids. It's like, what do you do?
Here's the thing. Also, I don't believe that education should stop after you receive the minimum amount of education to be a contributing member to society. I'm a big believer in lifelong learning. You already know that. I never stop learning stuff. I always think that we should continue to push ourselves further and further down the road, look forward towards something, and be able to surpass your boundaries. But the fact of the matter is, I think that most people don't accept that, and they only look at people that need to be educating themselves as the students, people that are in primary school and university, and some for the people that are fortunate enough to go to university.
I agree that life is about learning endlessly, until your last days. There's always something to be learned. I think as an adult, once you become an adult, once you finish the basic stuff, you can choose what to learn now. I think you find your passion, you find the things that you actually care about, and then you pursue the knowledge in those crafts and mold yourself into the person you want to be. When you're starting, I think, as far as the basic education, I think these are the most fundamental things. I think math, science, history, and English, I feel like these should be the ones that are nailed down, the most important. And I think these are the reasons why. It's math. What does math do? Math allows you to critically think. It allows you to solve problems. It allows you to put puzzle pieces together. It makes you think about stuff. What is science? Science is the practicality of math. It basically your surrounding world, and how does math fall into that? You start to understand the world around you. With history, what is history good for? History is good for seeing the past, looking at the actions of the past, and looking at the things that were good, looking at the things that were bad, and using the critical thinking skills you learn from math and science to start coming with answers to problems or recognizing patterns. That's another thing math is good at, is recognizing patterns at stuff. If you develop that skill, recognizing historical patterns will be, a really fundamental skill. And lastly, English. Why is English important? And this is coming from a guy who didn't like reading, hated English, always struggled. I finally figured out why English is important. English is important because it helps you and teaches you the skills to communicate. It teaches you how to put into words what you're trying to say. How do you explain something? How do you feel? How many times have you had a friend who's ever been like, I don't know, it just feels wrong. It's like, that's poor English. Now, and I'm not saying they're bad at English or they're bad at spoken language, but you can see how if they were better at English, they would be much more equipped to adequately explain their feelings. They would be good at communicating with one another. I think that's one of the most primal things about anything or anyone, any living creature, as far as animals are concerned, have a way of communication. And English, or language for those who don't speak English, this is such an important skill that I feel is not appropriately emphasized in school, at least from my experience. And I feel with these four things, math, science, history, and language, now you have the means, you've developed the skills to now pursue something further. And I think having respectable teachers with disciplines in these crafts who make it teachable, like Neil deGrasse Tyson or that scientist from the Manhattan Project. What was his name again?
Richard Feynman.
Richard Feynman. Okay, I'll remember it. Richard Feynman. I feel this would be at least one step closer to improving the education system. What do you think?
I think one-to-one people, it would be. Here's another deal, though. Education throughout all of humankind's history has vastly changed. Pretty soon, it's going to be very commonplace for people to learn computer science in schools because we literally cannot survive in our lives without some computational device. I mean, think about it. We talked about Steve Jobs last episode and how he invented the iPhone. What we haven't talked about is how dependent people are on smartphones nowadays. You literally, I mean, some people will literally have panic attacks if you took their phone away from them for an hour, right? And I mean, to each their own. Personally, if you took my phone and threw it in the Charles River, I'd be okay. I'd probably go, I'd be pissed that I have to buy a new one, but I wouldn't freak out that my phone was just destroyed. The point is, we rely a lot on this stuff, and there's an inability for most people to think logically. Because I think logic, maybe if there was some sort of logic taught in schools, that would be really important as well. And that could be a better precursor to learning computer science. Because we have to be able to communicate with computers in some way. It's only going to become more prevalent in our society. And you can literally see it. Everything nowadays relies in computation, or 95% of society does. You can't escape it. So we got to interface with it.
You're right. And as a computer science major myself, I approve of this. I approve of this future because I think it teaches you logic and problem solving skills, which I think are really cool. But that's obviously subjective, and for the people who freak out over losing their phones, I think that's less to do with education and more to do with maybe a couple other things. But
you get my point, though.
Yeah, 100%. With all that being said, to my loving teachers of the world, please be respectful and be dignified. To all the students of the world, do your best, believe in yourself, because I believe in you, Pete believes in you, and you can achieve anything if you put your mind to it.
Also respect your teachers. They are literally the most important people in your lives aside from your parents.
That too. And to everyone on Earth, I have only but one simple request, and that is to...
Don't stop educating yourselves.
And stay positive.